Hello and welcome to Castar Reviews. As of late, I haven't been living up to my promise of looking at retro games, with the earliest release I've looked at was 2001. But that changes now, because today and for the next few weeks I'll be looking at games that came out in the 20th century. Surely you've heard of Rare, correct? The UK-based game developer that was responsible for putting Donkey Kong on the map and creating hard-as-fuck classics like Battletoads and Battletoads Arcade? During the time that Banjo Kazooie was in development, Rare had an exclusive partnership with Nintendo, which is why they were trusted with a big Nintendo IP like Donkey Kong. As a result, Banjo Kazooie and its sequel Banjo Tooie started as N64 titles only. But that all changed in 2002. As game development costs were rising, Rare was hoping that Nintendo would either grant them more funding or buy them out completely. Nintendo did neither. Rare was almost purchased by Activision, which would have been catastrophic, but they ended up becoming besties with the new kid on the console gaming block, Microsoft. Rare is completely owned by Microsoft and their video games output has been spotty at best. Years later, Rare put the first two Banjo games on the Xbox Live Arcade, and they also released a completely new iteration of the series, but we'll get there soon enough. In 2014, Rare put out a massive compilation of their non-Nintendo greatest hits on the Xbox One in Rare Replay. Obviously, all three Banjo games are in this collection and playable on the Xbox One. That will be how I will be bringing this footage to you. While the series is dormant for now, the latest Banjo Kazooie development hit players right into nostalgia. The Bear and Bird made their appearance in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as DLC, along with a sweet rendition of Spiral Mountain. As usual with older games, I'll be looking at whether this game passes the age test, and if it's still worth playing over other 3D platformers on the market. Without further ado, this is Banjo Kazooie. Banjo the Bear and Kazooie the Bird live with Banjo's sister Tootie on Spiral Mountain. Spiral Mountain is also home to Gruntilda, an incredibly evil witch. Grunty, as she's known, is self-aware about her ugliness and she kidnaps Tootie to try and steal her beauty for herself. Banjo and Kazooie, with the help of a mole named Bottles and a shaman named Mumbo Jumbo, fight their way through her castle and the many areas within. They make it to the top, complete a quiz show about the game itself, and fight Grunty on the roof of the castle. She's defeated, Tootie is rescued for good, and everyone hangs out on the beach. Well, that's a bit shorter than what I'm used to, but this is par for the course when discussing platformer narratives. The story acts as a loose framework for what you're doing. In other words, the gameplay drives the narrative as opposed to the narrative driving the gameplay. For what it's worth, I like the characters and their personalities. Rare is known for breaking the fourth wall in their games, and this is no different. One of the most memorable parts of the game is the cumulative quiz at the end. It's something you don't expect, and frankly it would have been even better if there was no traditional boss fight at the end. Overall, the story does its job of not getting in the way of gameplay, which is exactly what I look for in a platformer. Now let's see how the presentation holds up from 21 years ago. All the other games I've looked at so far have definitely tried for a more realistic art style, so this is the first time I can do a legit art style critique. With that being said, I'm a big fan of the cartoony look of Banjo Kazooie. The character designs are interesting, and the major characters are easily distinguishable from the rest of the vibrant areas. Some of the minor characters can be pretty lazily designed though, with Rare just throwing googly eyes on inanimate objects. The worlds themselves are really great looking considering the time it was released. Each of the worlds are distinct and they bring something new to discover. The voice acting, or lack thereof, is a bit of a sticking point for me. The way that Rare decided to do the voices was to have mumbled up sounds for each character followed by a text box. Honestly, it gets pretty grating after a while. Of course, at the time, proper voice acting wasn't as ubiquitous as it is today, but at least try something other than burping noises or guttural sounds to voice these creatures. The music is great though. Grant Kirkhope is a famous composer in the platforming genre, and every theme is spot on. Some of my favorites include Mumbo's Mountain, Click Clock Wood, and Freeze Easy Peak. Click Clock Wood especially, since the theme is remixed depending on what season you're in. The sound effects are fine as well. Having a satisfying sound for picking up items is important in this type of game, since picking up items is 75% of what you actually do. Thankfully, Banjo Kazooie succeeds in this and all other non-dialogue sound effects. Speaking of the gameplay, why don't we move on to that? Much like with music, video games deal in all different kinds of subgenres. For example, when discussing shooters, do you prefer first or third person, or perhaps something more tactically oriented? In the case of Banjo Kazooie, the subgenre we're discussing here is the Collectathon platformer. The gist of this sort of game is that you're thrown into multiple self-contained environments and your only job is to collect everything worth collecting. As with all platformers, there are obstacles in the way to make it harder for you to get everything you need to collect. Your main target in this collectathon are puzzle pieces called jiggies and music notes. Jiggies and music notes are used to open up new levels within Gruntilda's castle. There are 10 jiggies in each level in addition to 100 music notes. Collecting every one isn't mandatory to beat the game, so don't drive yourself nuts trying to find the last few music notes or jiggies. I like this sort of structure, but there are some things I don't like about it. The lack of clues as to the location of jiggies can be enough to make you reach for a guide to look it up. There are some moments in the game where I think to myself, how did Rare expect me to find this without a guide? Thankfully these moments are few and far between, but it's still really annoying when it does happen. The control is really great. There's a wide variety of things that the bear and bird can do to mitigate any sticky situation. The one atrocious situation that you can't do anything about is swimming underwater. The controls are god-awful. It feels like you're trying to propel a plank of wood through the Long Island Sound. Banjo and Kazooie literally have underwater tank controls. Who signed off on this? The worst instance of poor swimming controls is in Rusty Bucket Bay. There's this jiggy that's behind the propellers of the ship. You hit a button to stop the propellers, and you need to swim there in oily water that quickly drains your breath meter within a pretty strict time limit. There's also a good chance you won't survive the trip back to land since oily water drains your air meter even when your head is above water. I can easily say that out of all the levels, Rusty Bucket Bay is the worst. Thankfully, since getting everything isn't mandatory, you can just skip that jiggy and all other ridiculously hard ones. But if you do that, you won't be able to collect the health upgrade before the final boss fight, which I believe is pretty necessary. Criticism of swimming aside, I'm a big fan of the structure. Gruntilda's castle feels truly like a castle with twists, turns, shortcuts, and secrets. While the levels are relatively small, they have so much depth to them that they feel much bigger than they truly are. Another interesting mechanic that adds depth is shapeshifting. Mumbo can turn Banjo and Kazooie into different animals in exchange for special tokens. Most of these transformations are used to find one or two jiggies, but they do add another layer to gameplay. The last thing I want to touch on is the quiz at the end. When I said earlier that I liked it, I meant I liked the concept of the quiz. The execution is terrible. My least favorite questions are the death questions, where if you get it wrong you lose a life. Second least favorites are definitely the Gruntilda questions. These are random for each game save and are weird questions about her life. You're supposed to hunt down her sister in the hub worlds for the answers, but if you don't know, then you're fucked. God help you if a death question you get is about Gruntilda. That is a dangerous game. Other than a few complaints, I enjoyed my time playing Banjo Kazooie, and think that's a nice starting point for someone looking to get into the collectathon genre. Does Banjo Kazooie pass the age test? Yes. Does it have problems that date it? Also yes. But these problems don't take away from the entire experience. I had a blast going through the different worlds of Banjo Kazooie, and would recommend it to anyone that hasn't played it yet. Next week I'm going to be looking at the sequel to this game, Banjo Tooie. Thank you for watching this episode of Castar Reviews. Subscribe for more content from me and follow me on Twitter for production updates. See you soon.